So this presentation is very much focused around the future of SEND transport and the policy that would go alongside our future operating model that we have been developing over the last few months. If you weren't able to attend our previous engagement events in the February time, it would be very worth you, after this event, going and looking at the video that we've produced of the presentation of that event. Today's event is only going to focus on key policy areas and where some of our ideas and thinking kind of fits in with policy. If you're interested in the sort of broader areas of work of the programme, then we did a video of this sort of presentation from February, which you're very welcome to go and look at. If you go back to the Surrey SENDT.online website, the website on the letter that you booked your tickets for this event, if you go back to that and scroll about halfway down, you'll find a copy of the video there of this presentation. This is the last webinar of 3, and we've also concluded 4 public events for parents and carers to come talk to us in person. There'll be a video up on that site again, maybe even later this evening, of the presentation. But you're actually going to see this presentation again today. I'm going to walk you through the identical presentation we gave to parents and carers at our live events. So you're welcome to post questions as we go along. This is the first time Surrey County Council has used webinars, and so far it's gone really well. We had some fantastic questions from parents, and we do welcome you to post your ideas and your questions. You can wait till we get to the slides to say questions, or you're welcome to just type them in as you go, and then when I get to the questions points I will pause and I'll work my way through people's questions. Don't worry, when we get to questions I will give you the opportunity to some time to type your questions in. So we hope to get a good dialogue going, and I will read out everyone's questions and I will do my best to answer them as we can. If we don't know the answers, we will say, but more or less we've been able to assist. Excellent. The one thing I do want to say is that we will not discuss this evening any individual personal circumstances. So occasionally we get a question, my child's situation is X, Y, and Z. We're not happy to discuss that in the public forum, but my colleague Sarah will message you privately through the webinar software, and we will have a chat with you, and Sarah can have a chat with you sort of separate on the side, and if necessary we'll take your number and we'll give you a call back tomorrow, after once back in the working day tomorrow. But welcome along, and let me take you through it. So the first thing that I want to focus on just briefly is to just give you a quick explanation of what commissioning is. So I'm a commissioning manager, and I'm running a program with Sarah and a couple of other colleagues now around redesigning our SEND transport system. And I think my position is quite important. I don't sit within the SEND casework service. I don't work for those colleagues, nor is my position based within the transport centre and the transport colleagues as well. It's a very neutral place in the middle, and quite deliberately, because that creates the opportunity to look at a service afresh, to understand what works well, what maybe could be improved, and in one essence to dissect a service area and then rebuild it based on what outcomes we want to achieve for children, young people and their families, what budget we've got in the future, and kind of how we can improve the service and make it work better for everybody. I mean, that's the goal, and we work quite hard to try and achieve that. But I think it's just helpful to explain to you all, where my role kind of slightly sits, because it is a bit different. So just a quick question, quick point, just to take you through the objectives of today's session. Planning to explain the purpose of the SEND Transport Commissioning Programme in its broadest sense. I've slightly started with that, but we'll carry on. We're very clear. We want to gather your views on our current transport policies. So we are going to be producing a new transport policy, possibly as early as tomorrow at this rate. These are the last of the public engagement events. We will start work on this tomorrow. But your thoughts and opinions on that are very important to us. And also gather your ideas for making the future of SEND transport policies fit for purpose for the future. So it would be important to do that. Andrea from Family Voice has asked a question, will we be doing a Q&A session after this? We've actually captured the questions from all these events, and yes, we'll be publishing a Q&A of those, and we will happily share that with Family Voice to put on the local offer website and their own website as well, so we'll happily do that. So moving us on, the purpose of the programme has 5 core goals. The first one is around developing independence. So everything the County Council does for children, young people, and particularly around SEND, should be promoting and developing those children, young people's potential for independence. And so I always have a sort of safety warning caveat here that we're very aware that the needs of children with SEND are so wide and diverse. I mean, we have 3,000 children in the transport system nearly, and everyone has a unique situation, unique needs. So it's important that the caveat is developing independence where it is appropriate, because we recognise there are some children, young people, where actually being more independent is really viable and possible, and there are others where it may not be possible, or the level of independence may be different. So you'll hear me say, whenever I kind of talk about independence, I often use the phrase "where appropriate," and just please hold that thought. Our second goal is around improving our users' experience. And I define our users as children, young people who are transported. I think that's fairly obvious, but actually it goes broader than that. It includes parents, carers. I would include the staff that are in the system that try and make this work as well as it does or doesn't. And also our providers, who are vital in actually delivering the transport assistance that children, young people, and families use. So a third area of focus is around making the system more efficient. And efficiency is an important word, and the system is around how do we make the processes, the way the whole thing is organised and work more efficient, clearer, simpler, easier to understand. I'd be wrong if I didn't say to you that efficiency can also mean around reducing cost. We have a very expensive transport system. We're very proud of it, but it's an expensive system, and we are working hard to drive efficiencies there. And I've got some slides coming up around that. But actually, the processes underneath the system are just as important as to improve that for users' experience and others. So our fourth goal is around developing our providers, and we're asking the question, what do we want from our providers in the future? What's the quality like? And actually, we know from our recent user surveys there's an 80% satisfaction rate, of good or above from parents and carers. So that's fantastic, and that's much higher than I would have expected it to be for the type of service. But there's always more to do, and we will never stop striving to improve that. And we've heard lots of comments from parents and carers across all the events that we've run now around, language and courtesy and lots of things that having the skills to support children a bit better would be really helpful. I think we're also being a bit more fundamental in saying, are the current providers the providers we want in the future? Do we want a different type of provider? Do we want to be using more charity sort of providers, or we might call community transport providers, who are OAP, dial-a-ride services that you'll typically see running around taking usually older residents to daycare centres or hospitals. They're often run as charities by the public sector, so they often provide a better service, and they're used to supporting the most vulnerable members of community. And arguably, our SEND children, young people are equally as vulnerable, if not more, in places. And then our final goal is around designing this whole system in collaboration with others. So this is such a complex area of work, we couldn't do it alone, and we would quickly come unstuck. So we have a real commitment to testing and designing the future with our parents and carers and our schools and our staff and our stakeholders and our providers, etc. It's not an easy task, and we're aware that we won't necessarily be able to please everybody all the time, but we're working extremely hard to try and do that. We're also aware there's not always in the county council have we been working in a collaborative, joint working approach with parents and carers. This programme is very different. This programme has been designed from the bottom up to collaborate and support parents, and you'll hear throughout my presentation that is a fundamental core goal of what we're looking to achieve. So that's the purpose. At all our events, I've been asking this question. So how much does Surrey spend on SEND transport? We're not trying to labour the point, but I think it helps focus the mind, and it often surprises quite a lot of people. So I'm going to give you 10, 20 seconds just to think of a figure, a financial figure. I warn you now, it's in the millions, but come up with a number and hold that in your head, and I'll share with you what that actually costs in a second. Okie dokie. So the reality is that the County Council on last financial year spent £27 million delivering SEND transport. and that's one of the most expensive in the country, and that equates to around £134,000 per day. So today it was an academic day, so the county council on average would have spent £134,000 this day getting just 3,000 children, young people, to and from their place of education. It equates to around £9,600 a person. These figures usually quite surprise people. People would expect them to be much, much lower, but they are the reality. So I think it's just a part of our being upfront and open is just to explain that. In contrast, the 22 special schools we have across the county have a total budget of about 58 million. And that 58 million covers everything from grounds maintenance, buildings, heating, lighting, electric, staff, resources, the teachers, the trips, everything you can imagine. It comes out of that budget. And we spend about half of that again just getting children, young people to and from their place of education. And we do understand why some of that is. I mean, we understand that the cost of living in Surrey is higher, so we would expect to be slightly higher in cost. We also know we have a very, one of the best education systems in the country in terms of our schools are Ofsted's good or outstanding for the most part. But what they also have is a very narrow band of specialisms that each school can support, and that results in children having to travel further potentially to get to their school, and the further you travel, the more it costs. So there's some work going on around looking at how we might review that for the future to try and educate children closer to where they live. I'm not going to particularly cover that today, but if you go to the other presentations I touched on before, you'll be able to have a look. I think it'd be wrong of us not to just highlight the County Council's general financial state. I'm sure not many of you missed the 15% referendum on the council tax that was being explored earlier this year, and the deal or no deal that didn't take place. I mean, what we do know is we were offered to be part of a business rates pilot, and that would have potentially raised more income. Now I'm hearing that actually the general election may scrap the business rates pilot. It may not happen depending on manifestos, etc. So the County Council almost back to where it was. But I mean, almost every year for the last year, this year, and next year, we're looking at around £100 million reduction in overall budgets across the organisation. Now, the council is prioritising social care and education, so it values those two things, and they're the most where it wants to put its focus. But no service is immune from the challenges of the council, and the council is in a very perilous financial situation. It is a very stressed story, and total government block grant is reducing to zero shortly. So yeah, it's just tricky. But I think within that, we've been asked to find something in the range of £4 million worth of savings from the transport budget. So we will still be spending £22 million or so in the future, but we actually want to find those savings in different ways, so through working with providers and working more collaboratively with parents and carers. And you've asked for that. So parents and carers have told us that they would like that, where it's practical and possible for them. So we are looking to promote that. So just to give you a snapshot of our transport system in March. So in March we transported 2,864 children to 279 locations from about 2,500 different postcodes. 200 young people were wheelchair users, 792 children have an escort, which is quite high. 106 children, young people travelled with solo transport only. This means that their need requires they can't travel with anybody else, so they have a solo car. We have about 1,100 contracts, and we're using 102 operators out of 150 or so that we've got that are available to us. So I mean, what that paints a picture is that every day there's 1,000 vehicles, morning and afternoon, running all over the county, taking children to and from either home and school at home, and it's a complex system. We started working on this project properly, I'd say, in October last year, and it took us a good couple of months to get our heads around just the sheer complexity and the difference of needs, and they all need to be taken into consideration as we design the future. So we've taken our time to try and do this well, and you've got opportunities to feed in your thoughts and your comments. So, just to quickly show you how Surrey compares with other local authorities. Again, I think this is just background to help you understand. But you'll see here that Surrey spends, just shy of £10,000 a child, and what our elected members do, quite rightly, is they will compare the county of Surrey with other counties. So we've picked the kind of key ones around us. I mean, you've got places like Hampshire and East Sussex, which have similar cost of living to living in Surrey, and they are, substantially less cost than the county council, Surrey County Council. And I've kind of touched on why that is, but we're focused on understanding that a bit further, and we've been working with our providers to actually share with them what we think, where we think we're being overcharged or we're not getting efficiencies, and we're aiming to work with them to drive down cost but and increase quality at the same time. And we're doing that very carefully. But I just wanted to show you how a lot of parents often ask, how does Surrey compare? So I think we just started to show you those. So that's the first key part of this, and then the next presentation is very much focused on the policy, so the key kind of focus, but it's useful just to give you that general introduction into the programme, why we're here, what we're trying to achieve. So if you've got any questions, I will pause now for a moment or two, and do type any questions in and I'll work my way through them. If we don't get any questions in a couple of minutes, then I shall move us on. So take a second and just give us your thoughts. Thanks. Okay, so we have a question from Sarah, or Sarah, sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, which is, when considering future providers, would SEC consider providers that use volunteers to deliver the service? We have considered the use of volunteers, and there is certainly a role. I think the experience of using volunteers in other areas of our work, volunteers by their very nature are voluntary, so they can choose if they want to stop or not at any point, and sometimes consistency has proven to be a challenge. And the one thing we know with SEND children and people is consistency is absolutely key. So we are, there is a place for volunteers, and we are exploring that further, particularly with our community transport providers. They're very good at supporting volunteers, and we have some volunteers, who are extremely reliable, but if you're going to roll it out as a sort of big idea, then you need to have a volume that you're confident in. So it's something we're exploring, but there are some challenges just around the reliability and consistency. So are there any other questions? Because so far I've only got that one. Oh, yep, no, okay, Andrea's question from Andrea. Are higher costs in Surrey duly made to the number and length of journeys or costs from providers? I think it's a combination of both. We recognise that potentially the costs, the amount we're charged per mile saved by provider is higher and substantially higher in some routes. We also know that shorter routes cost a lot more money. So providers like longer journeys, they don't like the shorter ones, and they charge. We can often pay more for that. So that's their areas that we're going back and charging. The higher cost is often, yes, just the length of journeys are often longer in Surrey because children are travelling further to get to their school. And so what we are looking at, yes, is how we can work with our schools to diversify the types of needs in which they can meet, so that children can have their needs met more locally. And if you went to most other council areas, if you lived in a borough, there may be 2 or 3 special schools within that kind of catchment area, in that area, and 90% of children's needs will be met by one of those 3 schools. Not in Surrey. In Surrey, we have a whole variety of very good. All our schools are excellent, but they're spread out, and we transport children to those schools, and that is a difference of approach than that's sort of been created in Surrey. I often get asked about building new schools, so we have got 2 new special schools approved by the Department for Education. I think I have a sort of an ASD focus. One will be based in Guildford, and one will be based in Leatherhead, I understand. I don't know the ages. We're often getting asked what's the intake ages. I've yet to find that out. I've asked the question, but I haven't been given the answers yet. So it's trickier. In the old, go back 5, 10 years, if the county council needed a new, more education provision in an area, it could have found the land and it could build a school and open it. Now you have to apply to the Department of Education, who have to look at, they look at the business cases and then they make a decision. And so the decision for that is with academies and free schools. It's very much no longer sitting as cleanly with the county council as it used to be. So yeah, there's work to do on that. But we can the schools we've got we can work with to help diversify, and we are exploring those. Oh, Andrew knows the answer. So the new free schools are 7 to 19. So thank you, Andrew. There we go. So any more questions? Okay, what I'll do, I will move us on because I want to give people their evenings back. But if you wish to post questions as I go, then please do, and at the next stage we'll get to them. So let me just move us through. So here we go. This next presentation, we're going to talk you through some of our thinking and our ideas around the future of SEND transport policy. Now, I have a sort of health warning again here that nothing at this point has been decided. We're getting quite close to needing to make some decisions, but we thought about sitting down and drafting a policy, but actually I've decided not to do that and wait until all these events are over. We get the questions through, we get the conversation. We've had a fantastic dialogue with parents and carers, and then use that information to help us focus when we write the new policy. So this presentation only focuses on areas where our future policy will have an impact or could have an impact, but no decision is taken, and our cabinet will make the decision either in July or in September now. So there's a genuine opportunity for you as parents and carers to feed in your thoughts and your comments, and there'll be a further consultation on the draft policy, believe it or not. So you'll all have a further opportunity to send in your thoughts and your comments, and we are really determined to craft this with parents in mind. Timescales are getting tighter because we have to have this in place by September, but we are committed to creating the opportunities for you to have that say. I've heard lots from events, parents saying, well, I've been to lots of SEND events, and it just, it always just sounds like the person at the front's already decided what they're going to do and they're just telling us. And this is different. This is genuinely different. We've deliberately decided not to draft something because we wanted the feedback and the comments from yourselves. So let me walk you through. So in the current situation, is that the County Council has 4 main policies, 2 for mainstream and 2 for SEND, pre-16 and post-16 policies for both. We also produce a SEND parent and carer statement, which was produced this year, and there's also a transport statement for post-16. Now, the post-16 transport statement is a very practical thing that we're required by law to produce, and it's essentially helping older young people in mainstream or SEN understand what are the means of getting to college or their place of education. So it includes all the bus services in the county, the train lines, and all those sorts of information. It's a very practical document in that sense, and we will continue to produce that. But having 4 main policies, I think has shown us that there's about 88 pages of text across those policies, and policies over in a council can often evolve over time. So someone produces a really good policy, and then things happen over the next over the year, and then someone in the next year they add a paragraph or 2. And what seems to happen, sorry, is you forward that 10 or so years, and you've got lots of different paragraphs being added in or amended or changed. And so we wanted to and I think that has led to a situation where the policies aren't as clear as they could be. I don't think they're as practical as they could be, and they certainly don't share the essence of the future of transport that we're trying to deliver. So I'll talk you through a bit more of that as we go through. But our proposal, or our suggestion, I guess now, is that for a future approach, we develop one policy document for all ages of mainstream and SEND children and young people. The reason for this is most of the legislation, the vast majority of the legislation, is identical for SEND as it is for mainstream. There's no difference. There's a few very specific bits around SEND, but much of it's, so if you're going to use a taxi, it must meet all these, various parts of legislation. So they must have MOTs and licenses, etc. But it's no different across the 2. So I think we've got an aspiration as a council to move to one policy. I think our thinking, certainly following feedback from parents and carers, is that we would possibly have a one policy for mainstream next year and one policy for SEN, and we may bring those 2 together in the future in a year or 2's time. What I would say, and I put the star there, the policy, one policy would have to have and will have very clear, detailed information around SEND children, young people. And I'm told quite regularly that around 90% of the council's work on transport is focused on SEN. So although the numbers of mainstream children with transport are much, much higher, it tends to be big coaches that do big pickup routes, and it's quite straightforward. Whereas SEND is more complex by its very nature, and there are lots of changes, and so we need a flexible process. So I think this policy will probably be 90% SEND, and then the mainstream bit will be included in there too, because the legislation is very similar. And as I said before, we would still produce the post-16 transport statement. So we welcome your thoughts on this, and if you've got any comments, you're welcome to post them in the questions. You're welcome to send them in to us over the next few days. We would be really keen to hear your thoughts. What we are thinking of doing is changing the phrase. So rather than being a transport policy, calling it a transport assistance policy. And we're thinking of doing this for very good reasons, in that actually the law states, and often a lot of parents we've found as we've gone around are unclear around this, but the law states it is every parent's duty to get their child to and from school. Every child has a right to an education, and as a parent you have that legal duty to make sure they get that education. The County Council has a duty to assist, and the legislation says that the word assist parents to meet that duty under certain circumstances. So everyone's usually familiar with the sort of 2 or 3 miles away from the school's 2 or 3 miles from home. If they've got mobility issues, then the council has a duty to assist where it can. So we're looking to rephrase this as an assistance policy, because actually assistance could be a range of things, and often what happens at the moment is either the parents do all the transport and we pay mileage potentially, or the county council does all the transport, but there's nothing in between. And we're looking at building a policy framework that actually provides a lot more flexibility and a lot more scope for collaboration and joint working with parents. And this will be a sort of cultural departure from the past, but I think that's a really good one, and one that we're leading the way in terms of transport, but it's a good opportunity. So proposal one policy, calling it a transport assistance policy, and then something I've been calling the 90-10% model, and this is, I'll explain this as clearly as I can. When you produce a policy, it is a document. It is a number of pages of text, and what often happens is we have to apply that policy to everybody, but the range of needs of SEND children, young people, are so diverse that actually having a document of text and saying we need to apply this to everybody is almost impossible, and possibly the wrong thing to try and do, because there's inevitably going to be children, young people who it doesn't work well for. And there's little, and often there can be built in, there's little flexibility, and what parents have said is we want that flexibility, we need that assistance. I mean, what we do know from sort of and I've looked at a lot of the complaints that we've had, a lot of changes, the requests that we get. I think a document could meet quite successfully probably the needs of around 90% of children, young people. It'll set out clear criteria, clear information, and everyone just goes on their merry way. But there is 10, what I'm suggesting is around, maybe 10%, it could be 20%, I don't know, but there's a cohort, a group of children, young people and families where their situation is more complex, their needs are different, and a document won't serve them as well as it could. So we're suggesting that we actually create an exceptions process. Now we're not clear about what that might look like, but what we are committed to is that it would be a process where you as parents and carers get to come and talk to us, or sit down with us, or ideally we would come to you and have a conversation, identify what support is needed, and then see what we can put in place. So it's just a different way of prioritising and focusing on things. We're considering using a sort of case law approach. So if a bespoke solution is required for a child or young person, then that would go on record as what as an agreement. And if a similar child or family came along, say 6 months later, with a very similar story, we could go back and say, well, that's what we did last time, we'll do that again. And that's just to make sure that we're consistent in our decision making, because I think a lot of criticism over the years around different decisions made at different points in time. So that's just a sort of snapshot around our thinking, that a document may not successfully meet the needs of 100%, so why try? And let's build in a process that actually can support those where the document doesn't quite work successfully. This will be quite a challenge for the council. It'll be very different to any other policy it's developed, but I think this is a more smarter, more collaborative, more supportive way of working, and we are working hard to develop that. There's a role around policy to develop and deliver just a cultural and a mindset change. And I define that as sort of three key audiences of that. And we know there's work to be done around our staff and our processes. And I've read the Ofsted statement. We were pleased that the transport project was highlighted as an area of, of good work, but there's always more to do. We want to make our processes as streamlined, as simple as possible. We want to cut out bureaucracy. We want to improve customer service and all sorts of things that our staff can do better to support people. And we, as an organisation, need to do. We need to. It's not. We need to give our staff the training and the support and the tools to do their roles differently, and within that, change mindsets and change culture. We're already started work with our providers. We've had a couple of provider events a couple of weeks ago with our suppliers. And, and that's around improving cost and quality, focusing on the user's needs more. A lot of work to be done around working with our providers to change their attitude in certain areas. And then I'd be wrong of us not to focus on the third one, really, which is yourselves, so parents and carers. And I'm often talked to by parents saying, I'm entitled to this, this, and this, and then I have to sort of explain, no, the legislation says it's your duty to get your child to school. It's our job to assist you, so we're happy to assist you. But I think the whole language around transport is in Surrey is just really unhelpful, and I don't blame parents and carers in the slightest for this. I have huge understanding and sympathy of some of the challenges and the I've read lots of the feedback, and I've been in workshops where I've heard genuine stories of how difficult it is to get communication, EHCP. So we're not in no way am I holding any kind of blame around parents, but we've got an opportunity with this project to take a very different approach together, and we want to move to this situation where we're collaborating and we're working in partnership, and there is a genuine open dialogue, and it's an easy conversation to have. We want to get to this place. Again, I don't think that'll be quick and easy, because I think there's a lot of trust to be rebuilt and restored, but we've got to start somewhere, and I think there's a role here in terms of setting out the framework in our policy to support that development. Okay, so some of our future policy principles, I can see a number of you writing in questions. Fantastic. I will get to them at the end of this section of the presentation, but do feel free to send in your questions and we'll go through them in a while. So these are some of our this is some of our thinking around our future policy principles. So what's important? Now, again, these aren't decided upon. These are open for discussion. We've had a number of comments from parents and carers, which has really helped focus our thinking. Equally, Family Voice have been fantastic in sending in, their comments and their sort of scrutiny of what we're doing, and I think that's very healthy, and we really welcome that, and we'll continue to do so. So the first principle around our policy should be around promoting and developing independence. I kind of covered that before, but everything we do, under the SEND for 2014 Act suggests that everything we should do, where appropriate, that phrase again, where appropriate, should promote and develop independence. The second point is around developing clearer criteria for assistance. So when and where should assistance be provided, what sort of circumstances, what's the thresholds, that needs to be fleshed out and made clearer. And we are committed to designing and developing that. And we actually, what I will say is, from all these events, we've had lots of feedback that's really helped us shape that. But our current policies, you can often jump around the different documents to try and find the information you need. And it may not be changing a lot, but it might just be making it much clearer and easier to understand. The third point here is around increasing support for parents and carers to transport their own children and young people. Now, I've been very surprised but really pleased over this response from parents going, actually, we would really like to be able to take our children to school. If you could give us the means and the support to do so, we would love to do it. And so it's something that we are focusing on in terms of our future policy. And there is, well, the previous events we held, we had some fantastic feedback from a number of parents who were saying, well, actually, if you gave me the choice, I would do this. So the example I've heard a number of times now is I could take my child to school on the way to work, because I'm going that way anyway, and I could drop them off, but I can't bring them back. But under the current transport policy, either I'd have to do both routes or you do both routes. There's no sort of joint sharing of any of those responsibilities, and that just feels like that's crazy. So actually, what we want to be doing is saying, well, okay, if you want to take, please take your child to school, and we'll bring them home, and we'll make sure they get home safe. And what our schools have told us, and they continue to tell us, is that children who are transported to school by parents or from, or picked up by their parents are happier, better ready for to learn, less less anxiety, all those things that we can see in SEND trans children more. And so it's a good thing for children to be transported by the parents, and actually schools have also said please encourage parents to transport their own children, simply because we get better contact with them. Often the driver of the taxi gets the note that goes home, and it's the driver is the communication conduit, and we'd love to talk to our parents more directly. So where it can work, where it can be helpful, to create that ability and that culture around supporting parents to transport their children. This next point kind of goes hand in hand, but got this term social capital, and social capital is a horrible government term, but it's essentially allowing communities, wider family networks to be involved in supporting transport. So we were touching on the volunteering. I mean, this would be getting social capital, but actually it's about helping, can groups of parents take their children to school? I'm going to talk you through some case studies a little while of Max as a young man that we've sort of mocked up and kind of explained some of this. But actually what we had parents come to our events and say, well, we will live within, a number of roads of each other, and our children will go to the same school. We could work together if you gave us the tools and the ability to take our children between us, and that would be fantastic. And the council were really keen to support that. We understand there would be some safeguards, some safeguarding concern issues that we would have to address. Do we DBS check everybody? We haven't worked that out yet, but we've got time to work out the detail. But the policy can build the principle of allowing that to happen if it can be done safely. So that's one point. The next question is another one that's come up from parents, is around actually, does the mainstream child or the SEND child get transported? And under the current policy and processes, you have a child, they have an EHCP or a statement of educational need, and they are therefore entitled or provided with assistance, transport assistance. But what we've also heard from parents is, well, if you gave me the choice, I'd possibly or probably prefer to take my SEND child to school because they're more complex, because they have higher needs, because I'm the best. They'll travel better with me than anybody else. And the best one I heard was a dad who said, "Well, I have a 9-year-old daughter. I drop her at the school gate in her mainstream primary school, and she doesn't talk to me. She wants to run off and talk to her friends. I'm not cool to stand with Dad. So, actually, if I took my SEND child, I would get to go into the school, have a dialogue with his teacher, and that would be so much better. So we're looking at creating a policy that actually says, well, you have an EHCP, but which child would you like us to transport? And we have a conversation, and it could be either. And this could be great for the child, and it could be good for the council, because actually a mainstream child would go less distance typically and wouldn't necessarily need an escort, whereas a SEND child would get the best support we can sort of work together to achieve. So it's a principle that we are very keen to continue or pursue. We want to create a future policy document that is plain English. So it's simple, it's clear, it's concise, it just lays it all out straightforward. I'd like to try and keep it under 10-15 pages. We don't want a huge document. And when we start writing this tomorrow or later this week, that'll be in my mind around keeping it clear. Just so it's easy to understand, and you shouldn't need to employ a solicitor to help you understand our policies. And I've heard that from a couple of parents who've done that, and that's not the case. Shouldn't be the case. So we want to make it a really plain English document. We want to create a document and a policy that promotes collaboration between the council and our parents and carers. So actually compels that to happen where it can, and actually create permission and the ability to have that discussion and that joint working. And then the final point here is around delivering independent travel training. So I think we're one of the few local authorities in our area that no longer has an independent travel offer. So this is training for children, young people, 11 plus typically, who with the right training and support could either walk to school or get the bus or the train or public transport to school. And we're looking at an offer at the moment which would provide, there's 3 assessments before a child is even accepted on the program. So there's an assessment at school, an assessment in the home, and an assessment with the parents out and about in the community. And at the end of those 3 assessments, if everyone deems, yes, this is a young person who's appropriate, then they'll start a training program, which is 6 to 12 weeks long and is morning and afternoon, 5 days a week, to support them to become independently travel. And we know this is really, for those where it's appropriate, and again, that phrase appropriate, this is fantastic, because when they grow up and get older, they can be more free, they can go out, they can go and get work, or they can go to hospital appointments or daycare centres or whatever they want to do, but they have that independence where the current transport system can often build dependency around taxis, and that's can be unhealthy for some children, young people. Okay, so when we talk about simpler and clearer criteria, I think we're looking at simpler and clearer criteria around entitlements and limits for transport. The law is very clear, and we'll have we will comply with that, of course. And then limits around, is there a limit for providing assistance? So part of education fairly clear, but council doesn't have to provide this service at any cost. So there's a level of which we would we would want to cap that, but we keep that as low as possible. I think there'll be very few people affected by that, but we need to be aware of that. Entitlements to solo transport. We get lots of requests by parents saying, "I'd like my child to travel solo," and our process and criteria for that is unclear, and so we want to build in some very clear understanding around when we would trigger that, when that would be available. And it's very appropriate for many children, and absolutely we provide it. We've also heard from schools, this child's going solo, but they don't need to, and it'd be good for them not to actually, because they could socialise. So we should be reviewing that and making that clearer. And then what I was referring to is the levels of assistance. So currently it's either parental transport or it's the council through taxis and buses, but actually the other local authorities are looking at many other levels of assistance. So the kind of least, and we're not going to be doing this, but it's just worth me explaining, the least would be around providing information. And there is a role. We have had some parents say, well, if you gave me information, help me, then I would do this, completely independently. There are some local authorities, I understand, who are thinking, well, our duty is to provide assistance, and a leaflet could be your assistance, or a booklet could be your assistance. We won't be doing that by a million miles, so don't worry about that, but it's something that I think we can provide that information, and we can make it a lot clearer anyway. Our second current area of thinking was our independent travel allowance. So currently there's a parental mileage allowance. We've had lots of comments and feedback around the kind of lack of generosity in that system, and how it doesn't really support families and carers to transport their children as well as it could. And we're looking at this at the extremes. So we're looking at this as actually, it may be better and cheaper for the county council to lease you a car and give you a car as a family, and you do the transport yourself because you've got the vehicle, than it is for us to pay £10,000 for a taxi on average. So a car might cost us £4,000 or £5,000, whereas a taxi may be 10. So, and actually you get the car to go out in the evenings and other times, weekends, go on holiday, do other things, and it will save money for the council. So when I say we're looking at all of this in a very different way, this is the kind of extent to which we are exploring things. And we're looking at the different mileage rates and how we may improve those, and there'll be some news on that coming out in the next few months, I'm sure. We're going to do some work around centralised pickup assistance. Now, much of the country is moving to a centralised pickup process. So rather than doing your pickup from front door to school door, centralised pickups is where a public building, usually, so a library or a youth centre or a community hall, sometimes supermarkets, cafes have been used for this. I know one local authority is working with a supermarket chain to do this. And parents drop their child off at a pre-agreed time. That more children, a large cohort of children, get on a larger bus, a sort of minibus, with an escort typically, and a driver, and a larger group of children are then supported to go to one school. So there's shorter journey times because there's not lots of pickup points which take time. There's an escort on board for the young people, so children and people, so there's more support, and it's a more efficient way of doing things. And I say most of the country is moving this way rapidly. We recognise in Surrey this will be tricky and won't necessarily work for everybody, and so we would look to build it as an option, and we will do more piloting and testing and later in the year. And then the fourth one here is around the door-to-door assistance, so what you might call the current level of support. So with people, children being picked up from their front door and dropped off, and there's going to be a cohort of children who will always need that. Young people with mobility issues are particular, would need that door-to-door assistance. Some people are living in very rural areas. There's a range of things that may impact on that, but we would look to provide clearer criteria for those. And then the last point here is around exceptions criteria. And I'm referring to this because we know we have around 125 children or young people at the moment who are in receipt of transport support who, by our current policy, are not entitled to it. But many of those have been given that transport assistance for really good reasons. So one way you could say is, well, we need to save some money, so we'll just stop that service. And there's about £1 million spent on those young people. But actually, that's a mistake, because we know some of those children are in the care system, so actually the county council is their parents, so we have a duty to get them to school anyway. We know some families are being provided with that assistance because they are just about coping at home, and actually transport assistance is a really valued thing. And actually, if we took that away, then maybe we would end up with more children in the care system, or we'd look at more expensive placements, which wouldn't be good for the family, and it wouldn't be good for the council. So we're looking at trying to develop a more sophisticated exceptions criteria. I mean, I probably think half of that 125 children, shouldn't be supported and have managed to get it. And actually, there's a finite resource, and it needs to be reserved for those that are entitled to it. But looking at the criteria to make sure we get it right in terms of, if people genuinely need that assistance, then we want to be able to provide it. Okay, so just to sort of summarize, we are looking at developing a policy and a system of transport in the future that is delivered in collaboration with our parents and carers. It is a partnership between the two of us. It's co-designed with you and it's co-delivered with you, and these workshops and other conversations are part of that commitment. And then the last two here around evaluate and improved with you are, I think, sort of ongoing, will never stop in a sense. And there will always be work to do, and as much as we're working really hard to get this as good as it can be when we go live in September, October, we recognise it won't be perfect. As hard as we work, there'll always be areas where it could be improved. But we will want your feedback, your comments, so we can learn from those and we can quickly develop and improve things. So that's our commitment to achieving that. Now the next two slides, the next slide in particular is around the EHCP annual reviews. Again, another sort of health warning here. We've heard lots from parents and carers about how the EHCP process isn't working as it should, and I've heard about the annual reviews very, very clearly from parents. There's no holding back, which is great, and actually parents not even being invited to the meetings and what have you. So the contents of the slide, when I show it to you, is based on the principle that the new EHCP process and review process that's being developed now works effectively and is sufficient. And if it doesn't, if they don't achieve that, then what's on this slide I think is up for grabs. But I think it's important just to share with you, some of our thinking. So in the current annual review paperwork, there should be two questions at the moment. Is transport required next year, yes or no? And if a child has an escort, is that required, yes or no? And even the feedback we've had from regulators is saying we should be asking, that should be smarter. And children's needs change over the years, people move house, lots of things develop and adapt. And what can often happen is a taxi is awarded, is arranged at age 4, and it could go all the way through to 25 potentially. It's rare, but it can go, it can go all the way up. And so we need a process that on an annual basis reviews things and says, just quickly looks at it and says, is this the right support? Can it be developed? And schools have said actually there's a role here around that independent promotion, because they've said to us there are children coming to our school who could be more independent but are not. Their parents don't understand, are hesitant to allow them to be as independent as they can. And what I've also heard from parents, to be fair, is children can be very different in school, in transport, and at home. So those three sort of environments need to be recognised. But actually, schools are saying, please help us promote independence where appropriate, whereas transport at the moment kind of builds a dependency, which we should be trying to design out, unless it's absolutely necessary. So the second point here is around support and prepare. Yeah, I've talked about this, but support and preparation for independent travel. So where appropriate, we should be reviewing that EHCP. And what schools are saying is, we might know that in 1 or 2 years' time, a child would be, should be ready to be trained independently. But we might want to start a year or two from that point to start planning, and we could do work in the classroom. Parents can do work at home to prepare for that, and the thinking and the work can go on. So that actually, when they become they're 13, when they become 15, actually they're ready to be referred and they get the right support. The next point is around reviewing personal travel plans. Now I'm going to come back to this because my next slide is all on personal travel plans. This is an idea that we've been doing a lot of work around, a lot of thinking on, and I'll just come back to that point. Within the annual reviews, to review the level and mode of assistance. As I was saying, people do move house, children grow up, things change, and there should be a review of that. And then engaging with schools in the planning of education, in planning of transport assistance. And schools have told us they would like to be more involved in helping define the need and helping define the type of transport required. So the one that struck me most was schools saying, we have children coming to my school, Lee, who have an escort, who actually we don't believe would need one, who is very independent, should be okay, shouldn't need one. But we've also got children coming to school who don't have an escort, who we really feel should have one. And I think sometimes that can depend on parental ability to negotiate. In the current system, parental ability to put their points, get their case, and get what they need. And actually, there's an inequality there, and I want to design a process that inequality is designed out as best we can. And actually, if a child needs an escort, they get one. And if they don't need it, then they don't get one. And we're all clear on that. So there are some of the things around the annual reviews, and again, we know the annual review process isn't working as well as we'd like it to, and so I recognise that, and there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and we're in the periphery of that work, but I am aware of it. So the last slide of this section is around introducing personal travel plans. This is a principle around creating a more personalised approach to supporting children and young people, and creating the opportunity for that dialogue between parents and carers and the council in a clearer. So what we're proposing is that there's a very simple plan produced around helping a child travel to school or to their place of education. And we're looking at this being a very simple document, ideally no more than a side of A4. I'm actually proposing that parents produce this, and for the very simple reason that nobody knows a child better than their mum or dad or their carer. Their parents and carers know them as better than we do at County Hall, and so it would be wrong of us to try and assume anything. But our schools have said actually they're very willing to help parents produce this and help shape it, and they will work with parents to put it together. More conversations being had with schools. But it would set out the child's basic needs that we need to know about for transport and transport assistance. Now, I've heard lots from parents going, oh, no, we don't want to keep repeating my child's story, and we're not asking you that. What we are asking is about what does a transport provider and the team that's planning this need to know about your child in order to get it right. So, if your child has epilepsy, we need to know that. If they've got other needs, then we don't need to know every ins and outs if it makes no difference to transport at all. But what do we need to know around transport? And that way we can plan and we can work with our providers and suppliers to meet those needs better. And at the moment, our caseworker would fill in a form that says from this address to the school address, basis some very simple needs, maybe what equipment is needed, and that's sent in, and then the transport team arrange it. And I just don't feel that's intelligent enough and informed enough around meeting each child's needs. So what we're proposing is that when we put out to providers and say, who'd like to do this route with these 2-3 children on it, they'll also get an anonymized version of each travel plan, and they will write back and say, well, we can do it for this price, but actually these are the things that we can do to meet these child's these needs. And the story if anyone's been to our previous events, I say this a lot, but the best story I've heard so far was a driver who was transporting a young man. I think he was 11, and he was getting really agitated and upset and very it was unpleasant to watch, was the way the driver described it. And on the end of the second week, he spoke to, I think, mum and dad on the Friday afternoon and said, is there anything I can do to help your son's experience be improved, to give him a better experience? And the parents said, well, the one thing that we do, it's a bit far-fetched, but the one thing we do is if you try putting Barbie Girl by Aqua on the radio, and see if that makes a difference. So the driver went, oh, okay, went home, downloaded it onto his iPod, Monday morning, plugs it in, plays the song, and this young man sat in the back of the car, dead still, bopping his head side to side, looking out the window, very content, very calm, very comfortable. A transformation from what was going on before. And so what we know is sometimes the simplest things make the biggest difference, but often that doesn't get captured. And that's where parents' care is going to be really valuable in giving that information. So we want to ask the question, what supports your child to travel successfully? And then we can then work, as I've just explained, really to build around that. And then again, the personal travel plan will explore, how we can prepare a child or young person for independence at what point, and if appropriate. So, actually, a personal travel plan will evolve over the years with the child, and schools will help work with parents to write those, and that way we can build and get ready for independence if appropriate at the right point. So there we go. So that's the kind of key thrust of our current transport policy early principles. I can see a lot of questions have come in, so I will jump straight to them. But if you've got any others, do add them to the list, and I will work my way down them. So give me 1 second while I just catch up. So, question from Sarah again. Would there ever be a consideration that parents or carers take the child to pick up, drop-off point to get transport rather than home to school and vice versa, thus allowing more pupils on larger vehicles? So hopefully I covered that off in sort of latter part of my presentation. Absolutely right. So the collection, the centralised pickup process is something that we are exploring. And we want to use safe venues. We did consider piloting this sort of the latter end of this term, but the one thing I was loath to actually run a pilot of this nature because it involves changing children's transport arrangements, and we know that consistency is so key. So we would look to implement something from, say, a half term onwards or what have you in the future for a group of children, and we will learn from that and roll it out. But there's lots of evidence across the country of this going very well and very effective. We've heard from children or young people more saying to us, my older brother my mainstream older brother gets on the coach to school, and he walks out the front door, and I have to sit and wait for my taxi, and I want to be more like him. I want to be more independent. I want to be able to get my own bus. So actually, although they've got to be taken potentially by parents to a youth centre or a library or whatever, there's an element there of promoting that independence that we're keen to consider. So a question from Andrew is, how far have we got with working out the cost of potential savings of either bringing transport in-house or commissioning community not-for-profit providers? We've done a huge amount of work on this. It's almost too much to describe in a webinar. Creating an in-house transport service, we believe would be expensive. For many reasons, the capital cost of outlaying to buy over 1,000 vehicles, recruit all the staff, train everybody, and I think also local government pay rates and the pension scheme would mean it's expensive. It may not be £27 million worth of expense, but our finance colleagues have looked at that. When we met with our transport providers, we gave them some options for the future. So one option was work with us to reduce cost and be more efficient, and we looked at a number of areas there. On the bottom of that slide was our kind of final option, which was if we can't work with suppliers to deliver best value, then the council reserves the right to create its own transport in-house service, and we would look to do that. There are some councils who have their own services, and they really don't enjoy having them, is the only way I can really describe it. Hampshire employ their own escorts, and they find that incredibly complicated, very expensive, and have lots of the same issues as we do around quality. So it's not always the way. We've done a lot of work around using community transport providers, our sort of dial-a-ride providers. We've now met with most of them. I met with all the chief executives recently of all the local authorities, a lot of local authorities run these services, the borough and district councils, and we're working with them. I mean, sometimes they're cheaper, sometimes they're not, and then that has to be taken into account. They can only operate vehicles of a certain size. They can't use a car. They can only use 8 seats or more. So those vehicles will cost more because they're larger. But if you can put more people in them, then they're very efficient. If you've only got a minibus with 1 or 2 young people in it or children, then they're more expensive. So there's lots of analysis gone on around that. Another question, young people will have a duty to participate. The local authority has a parallel duty to facilitate and assist young people with disabilities to access education appropriately to their needs. And absolutely right, and completely agree. And that's why we provide transport assistance, so we are focused on providing that. The difference is where the level of assistance lies, really, and the council doesn't have to provide something at any cost. So we're really proud in Surrey that we've raised our participation age of children. We've got more children in education than ever, and we work very hard to achieve that. And one of the reasons we're not going to just go to the leaflet information option that I know one of the local authorities very seriously been looking at is because actually we know that would stop a lot of children and people accessing education because their parents simply couldn't do it or couldn't afford to do it. And it would be a false economy to even consider that. So that's why we brought that out. So I got a comment from Catherine. So I work and I can only transport my child if the school can provide breakfast after school clubs. Special schools don't do this. Some do, some don't. I understand there's a larger thrust from central government for more pre and after school provision for special needs children. We actually had a conversation in the office today about, because parents have said to us, well, be great if they could stay at an after-school club, and they love to do so, but it means they need picking up at 5 o'clock rather than 3:30. So either we then have two waves of travel as a council, or actually it might be 5 o'clock and a parent can do it. So we are going to be working closely with schools. I don't see this changing for this September. It'll be too soon, but certainly in the future we are looking very carefully at how we can provide that assistance. Because actually it's a really good thing for children to go to breakfast clubs and after school clubs, and we want to try and facilitate that. Another comment around needing some flexibility of timing of pickup and drop-offs. There are often conflicts of trying to get other children to and from school. It's a real struggle. Yeah, we fully understand that, and that's why I think we're not going to race into the centralized pickup option. We need to learn from it. We need to test it. It won't work for everybody all the time. And also, what parents have often said to us is, actually, I quite like what some of what you're suggesting in your new transport. But if it doesn't work for any reason, I don't want to have signed away my right to go to another offer of assistance. And we're going to very carefully work through that. Actually, if a parent's able to do the transport, but then suddenly they're ill, then we would have to stay. We would provide assistance that was different to make sure the child got to school. So we want to build in that flexibility so parents can have the confidence that they're not going to make one decision and regret it later. So another question from Sarah. Has the exploration around transport policy collaborated with the provision of wraparound care at SEN schools in order to help facilitate parents' or working parents' ability to do some or all the pickup points? There's a lot of work going around exploring, and I kind of touched on that with the after school club. It's quite a similar kind of need. We have had those conversations. We don't control the social care elements, and the transport team are involved in the conversations there. I don't really have any more to say on that. We still need to work our way through that. I would think that would be a more policy version 2 the following year is more likely to be supportive around that, but it's certainly an area that we need to keep in mind. These are some fantastic questions. Next question from Karen. Thank you, Karen. How will the policy address conflict between parents who work full-time and the challenges around that and the mainstream children? So I think what we touched on there, actually, maybe we will transport a mainstream child rather than a SEN child is an option, and we would need that conversation and putting that in place. So we're aiming to build a policy that has a range of options of support and assistance. There's a lot more diverse probably than the current, and hopefully there's that greater flexibility will help more parents in this situation. But we understand the challenges, and we are looking to support there. So another question from Karen. Centralised pickup assistance sounds good in principle. How will children who struggle with crowds, noise, waiting be accommodated with less stress? How will this be adaptive to parents who work? So maybe hold that thought until I'm going to show you Max's story in a minute. But we are looking at venue. If you're going to do this, it would be venues that are appropriate. So our youth centres are quiet in the mornings and the afternoons at those times. Children can use the toilets and sit down inside if the bus is late or the parents are late, what have you. So we can have staff that support that process, and it's about picking the right venues to do it from. I know some of the local authorities have been using supermarkets and thinking that's fantastic because they can sit in the cafe, and I'm sure it's great for the supermarket if you go and do shopping afterwards. But we do recognise that for some children, actually, crowds, noise can be really distressing and is not the right type of venue. Though I think Surrey is lucky; it does have a lot of community-based venues that would be perfect for this in terms of community halls and spaces that we could use. So we would look to develop this slowly and learn from it as we go. Another comment from Karen. The criteria for escorts is very unclear. You're talking about you'll have a son that has provided. My son has one. The provider has refused to take him without one, but I still haven't found how to get it onto his transport requirements. And I think this is what we're flagging up here. This is where children need one, but it's not easy. And actually, this would go into your son's personal travel plan, and it'd be detailed in there why, and then we'd be able to pick that up and understand that and make sure that gets addressed. Another area of work that we're about to pilot is we're looking at bringing 4 caseworkers initially into our transport team and creating a merged send transport service. So actually all the information and all the decisions are taken in one space rather than lots of processes running across the county. And this would be to actually have closer information around your child's needs so that we could actually make better decisions. I think the other part of this is it's about having a conversation with you, which I know sometimes doesn't always happen at the moment, and actually you have that dialogue, and if that's the judgment and the school school confirm that, then that's what we would supply. So yeah, we want to improve all of that. Another question, how will the wider Surrey transport network be utilised to promote independence? The current public transport, buses, trains does not enable young adults to travel to school, as many of these schools are located away from public transport. So yes, I mean, when it comes to public buses, we've actually got the ability to potentially switch some bus routes around if that's useful. Not the easiest thing to do, but I've had the conversation, it can be done. Train lines are where they are. What we are looking at doing, for supporting independence. We know a lot of children probably get to a train station, and that may be a point where one of our larger buses picks up a larger cohort of children and does the remainder of the journey. So they may be able to travel independently a part of the way, and then get on another vehicle that we would supply to take them to the final part to school. And there are also some schools that are nowhere near bus routes and what have you. So rendezvous points is an area we're exploring. Again, we'll work with the supplier, and we'll work with our schools and yourselves to make sure that's done appropriately and works well. There's some good examples across the country where children rendezvous at a train station. So say Woking train station, and then there's a bus and an escort waiting to take them the remaining way. So there are creative ways of doing this. We want to give those children and people all the support that we can around promoting their independence, but we've got to make sure they're safe. We've got to make sure it's done appropriately. And then Darren, thank you for your question. We are wondering how our son will adjust to travelling to college after leaving school. Would this policy be able to help him in his college years? And become independent? Absolutely right. So the independent travel offer, it would be perfect for somebody transitioning from secondary school to college, for example. We would look to put that training in early, and then your son would be supported to travel as independently as possible. The providers that we're talking to would also come back if anything changed. So if you moved house or change of school to college, then they would come back in and sort of do a number of weeks sort of readjustment to help with that change. So it's a very flexible system. We've also knows occasionally it goes really, really well, and then there's a bad day and confidence can be wobbled, and the provider will be very quick to then come back again and say, right, come on, let's get you back on the bandwagon and support you the last bit. So we're looking at how that can be done. And the last question that we've got: is there a minimum age limit of children getting assistance via central collection point areas? No, there isn't, and because the theory goes that there's a bus sitting and waiting, so parents should maybe meet there at say 8 o'clock. The bus is the contractor's asked to be there at 10 to 8, so there should be a direct handover of parent to bus or parent to escort, and vice versa. At the end of the day, the bus wouldn't leave until the parent collected them. So that can be appropriate across the country. This is being used for all ages, and because we would provide an escort automatically for a 4 to 5 year old, and an escort would typically would be there would be an escort provided if there was a child of that age. I know some I can't remember the local authority now. One local authority has a bus with 2 or 3 escorts on board to support children, young people, and it's still a lot more efficient, and actually it's a lot more developmental as well. So they're the questions that we've had. So thanks, that's brilliant questions. I'm really pleased. So thank you so much for your comments. If you've got any more, then by all means pop them through. What I'm going to just do now is I'm going to just take you through Max's story. I'm not going to take very long at this, but Max doesn't exist, I should say, but Max is a hypothetical young man that we've generated, but generated based on all the comments and stories and discussions with parents. So a lot of what Max is about will be hopefully quite familiar. I will warn you is Max, his needs change through these case studies, and he grows up as well, so he evolves at the same time. So he doesn't stay he's a 4-year-old when he starts, but we don't stay 4 all long. So just to introduce you to Max, here he is, a little cheeky chap. Max is 4 years old. He's planning to go to a school that's 25 miles away from his home, which is unfortunately not unusual in Surrey occasionally. The council currently plans to provide a taxi each way, morning and afternoon, to achieve its goal of supporting Max and his family to get him to school. Now, the bit in grey text here was one of the products that we will be producing from the project is a guide to send transport. Now, this will be quite a book, I think. It'll be quite a booklet, but it'll be very clear, plain English, explain all the steps, how to request transport, how to fill in personal travel plans, what are the transitions between primary and further ed, or all the different details that are needed, because I've heard lots from parents saying it's just very confusing. And how can you help us make it less confusing? So Max's parents have been given that information. So the first key scenario that we've got, I think is very typical of today. So I've heard of these at lots of events. So due to work commitments and the need to transport Max's sister to her school, the parents asked the council for assistance to get Max to his school. So parents work, they've got 2 children, they can't be in 2 schools at once at the same time. So what assistance? So this is kind of the as-is scenario, the current. So the council would tender for a route that Max is on, and he travels to a school with one other child from his area. Max is only 4, so he's provided with an escort. Again, very typical of the current situation. So just moving us through, so scenario B1, Max's parents in the future will be asked how they're planning to get him to school. Bear in mind it's the parents' duty to make sure their child gets an education. The family explains that actually Max's dad can take him to school on his way to work, but it's not possible to pick him up. So the council quickly agrees a bespoke travel scheme, and we put this in place for Max. His parents don't need to access the travel allowance because actually this is on Dad's route to work anyway, so Dad will be doing that mileage, so there's no need to sort of subsidise that. But the council will arrange for Max to come back in the afternoon. We'll arrange a taxi to return him, and because Max was age in that taxi, he'd be provided with an escort. But when he travels with his mum and dad, he doesn't need an escort because they're very familiar with his needs and travelling with him. So this is a sort of more flexible scenario that we're trying to develop in the future, where we can support parents to undertake as much transport as possible and be as flexible as possible. We want to be able to do that. So sort of progressing this on, so the other child I was referring to earlier lives in his area, is called Sarah. There she is, nice and smiley. They live near each other and the families know each other. I think that's quite key. The council asked Max's parents if they're willing to transport both Max and Sarah to the same school. They both go to the same school. They're currently both going in the same taxi. Both sets of parents know each other well and they both agree to this. I think that's a key definition. So the council offers Max's dad then, or the parents, access to our independent allowance to pay a mileage rate. It might be more than 45p, hopefully, because actually they're transporting Sarah, so we would finance more than just Max. So we would also offer support to get Sarah to school. But in the afternoon, an escort is provided and a taxi to get them both home. So again, this is the sort of social capital bit I was talking about, where actually groups of parents work together to help deliver transport, and we provide the assistance we can where appropriate. And these are things that parents have asked us to go away and work on. So moving that on again, B3. So Sarah also travels with Max to the same school, but Sarah's parents explain that Sarah's mum doesn't work on Mondays and Fridays, and so she could go and pick them up and bring them home. So the council agrees to pay Max's family to take them both to school, and pay that mileage, and pay Sarah's parents for the 2 afternoons a week that she can do. And then a taxi is provided for the remaining days. Now, this is good for children because getting their parents into the schools, getting the best possible transport is by parental transport. There's no hiding. This model is very good for the county council's financial situation too, because it's not providing an expensive taxi. It's providing parental mileage, and it's getting these 2 children to school successfully. So it's a more flexible, adaptable approach. And we do recognise things change, so we would need to flex and adapt with that. So just to move through. Max's parents are asked how they are planning to get Max to school. Max's story changes a bit here. They explain they have 2 children, so Max's sister Sally, there's Sally with her bunches, but they can't take them both to school at the same time. And this we hear all the time. Actually I can one or the other, but I can't do both. Sally attends a local primary school. Max is older than Max, and the council offers the parents the choice of taking either Sally to school or Max. And they can choose. Because of Max's needs, the parents are happier to transport Max themselves, as they can improve the communication with school, and they accept the offer of assistance from the council. And a taxi takes Sally to school. So we want to build into our policy that mechanism of assistance. And again, this is good for everybody. It's great for Max because he's getting the best transport that we can facilitate. it gets Sally to school as well, and it's good for the council because Sally's journey is just a lot shorter because she goes to her local primary school. So there's some benefits on all sides here, and that's certainly a key focus. So now we're moving up. So scenario D1. So we know that Max needs a good education. His parents are looking at his school. He's still 4 at this point. Ideally, they would like a closer school, but there hasn't been one offered. So the new transport team works with, he's got his completed personal transport plan. So we know what his needs are. And we're looking to put an assistance package in place. When we have a conversation with our admissions teams, see if there are closer schools, and we identify a number that are, and parents pick Cherry Tree Lane School because it's only 5 miles away. I think this is for the future, in that when we're doing more work with our schools to diversify the range of needs they may be able to support, we've opened additional schools to meet, to be more local. And so the council then arranges transport to get Max to and from school, but the distance is a lot shorter. So again, it's good for his welfare because we know longer journey times can have an impact on welfare, and it's good for the council because the journey time is less. Just going to move you through. So scenario E, there's only one more to go. Max needs to get to school, but due to work commitments, Max says his parents can't do both runs again. But this time Max is booked onto the Purple Route Send bus. So this is one of our centralised pickups, delivered by a community transport provider or a Dial-A-Ride minibus supplier. Claire's the driver and Simon's the lovely escort. The bus meets all 8 children on this bus at 8:20 in the car park of the local youth centre. Claire, the driver, has a key to the youth centre so the children can use the toilets or they can wait inside if they need to. And then at 8:30 the bus will leave for school, so there's a sort of 10-minute drop-off window. The bus arrives at school at 9 AM ready to learn, and the journey's a lot shorter than it would be if they were doing lots of pickups. The 3 children on the bus need an escort, so Simon's there as the escort, but all the children on board actually get to be supported by him, and they can sing songs or do whatever's appropriate. And at the end of the day, Claire and Simon will do the return journey, meeting at parents at the youth centre at 4 PM. And occasionally someone's delayed, so actually, they'll keep them safe either in the bus or in the youth centre until they're all collected. And one of the elements that we're actually developing and we're going to be introducing is GPS tracking of all our vehicles. The parents will eventually be able to see the location of every vehicle, so you'll know if they're delayed where they are and be able to communicate. So some real sort of technological developments to help kind of improve that. And then the final one, I've kind of talked through this in the previous stuff, but this is around our independent travel. So Max isn't, he's been at school for 8 years. He's now 13. He's doing really well. His school's been working with him on his independent skills. The guide to transport explains to his parents about how to refer Max to the independent travel service, the ITT, independent travel training. School does some work with Max to prepare him and invites the trainer in. He does the number of assessments, and Max is deemed, yep, it's great to put him on the course. And over the next 6 to 12 weeks, Max is trained and he does extremely well and is now able to travel to school independently each day. And what often happens is we provide the bus pass for him, and we have an app. There'll be an app on a phone. We're looking for a solution for that, so we can actually track Max, so we make sure parents can see where he is. So these are just a range of scenarios just to help try to visualize or help you understand the sort of variety of thinking that we've got, and policy has a key role in framing how some of these options can work very differently for the future. It'll take a while to implement. You won't see any huge changes too quickly, but we want to be a more flexible, more collaborative, more supportive as we go through. So are there any questions on that? Whilst you're typing your questions, I'll put this slide up. So at the live events with parents in the room, we've got parents into groups to have discuss these 4 kind of key topics, and we've captured on sort of post-it notes their ideas and their thoughts for the future. So around ways to improve our policy. So you've heard our thinking, where we're thinking of going, and we welcome your comments as always. But have you got any other thoughts or ways to improve that? The one in green here is really key for me. These are questions. These are things that you think, questions you'd like us to go away and think about. And the one thing I really value with Family Voice is they've been fantastic at saying to us, have you thought about the young person with this type of need living in the most rural part of the county, and how's this going to work for them? And we need those questions to make sure that when we implement, design, or improve what we're doing, we take all those factors into consideration, and your feedback is vital. So are there questions you'd like us to go away and think about? The fourth one in blue, the third one, sorry, in blue is, how do we increase children and young people's independence via policy? Have we got enough? Is there more that we can do? Any other thoughts? We'd welcome that. And then at the previous events in February, we asked this question around what's working well, and it was the sheet that was filled in the most. And the reason we asked this question, and we keep asking it, is because what works well is really important, and we need to, safeguard the stuff that works well and improve the bits that aren't. We don't want to be losing some really good practice just because we've kind of changed things. We want to be building on that. So it's not the easiest things to do to send in your comments on a webinar for these points, but at the end of today, probably tomorrow, you'll receive a survey, a sort of feedback form, and these questions are on that form, and we would love you to give us your thoughts and send them back to us as soon as you can. We will have to get writing with this new policy pretty quickly, so as I said, we've been doing these events for nearly 3 weeks, so this is the last one, so we really would welcome your comments quickly, and we promise to get that form to you, ideally tomorrow, hopefully. So if you've got any comments, you're welcome to put them in the questions, and I will gladly reflect on them. I have a couple of questions that have come in, so I shall jump over to those. So a question from Andrew: I think it'd be wrong to speak of asking parents how they plan to get Max to school in cases where nearest suitable school for Max is beyond the statutory walking distance. I think the question should be reframed to say Max's parents are asked what assistance, if any, they need. It's a good point of view. It's something we've heard from elsewhere, and we are looking at that. And I think it's about framing it so that how are parents able to do what they're able to do, and how can we then help them to do that, and if it's not practical, why, and then what assistance do we need to supply, and we would look through that. And then a question from Hannah: with the proposed GPS tracking with all vehicles, how will this work with local taxi firms? So we will supply an app for an Android phone, and most taxi companies use Android phones, and it's a very dedicated app that talks directly to our transport system. So my colleague Sarah, who's sitting diligently in the background here, the team that she works in has access to a very sophisticated software system that plans all the routes and manages all of this work. And this app talks directly to that and provides every 30 seconds a ping of where the vehicle is, and from that you can work out speeds and all sorts. And that information will come back to us. But we'll put in the contract to providers that all providers must use our app every day, and they will have to have an Android phone to do it. What we're learning is that not all companies use Android equipment already, so it's not going to add cost in terms of the technology, and it's going to cost us £10 a vehicle for the app per year, which is peanuts in the grand scheme of things. And if it gives us the benefits we're expecting, then it'd be really good. We often know that if parents, if we don't get told that a child didn't travel to school one day, so they were ill or there were a hospital appointment or whatever, often parents will tell the driver and say, well, they won't be around tomorrow, and we have to assume that we get told that as well by the provider, and then we don't get charged. But we do know that often, we do get charged for routes that don't take place. So the GPS tracking, because each child will be tapped in and out of the vehicle, and our system will automatically know whether they were transported or not, and then we'll know whether to pay for it or not. And we think that could save substantial sums of money in time. So and it's just not paying for something that we're not getting. So it's good for everybody. It means we then keep the money that we have got for the things we really value. So if there are any other questions, I will take them now. Otherwise, I will thank everybody for coming. As I say, it's been really good to hear from all our parents and carers. The next steps are going to happen quite quickly. We will be publishing a draft policy on transport in the next couple of weeks. We will be discussing that with our partners and our staff, and we will put that out for wider consultation, so you'll have the opportunity again when you see the document to send in your comments. That will then be refined, and our cabinet will make its decision of what the future policy later this summer. Alongside that, there will also be a consultation around the future operating model. So policy will set the framework, but actually how is it going to work and what we're going to do. And again, that will go out for probably a 6-week consultation period, with lots of opportunity, and a further round of events and webinars for parents and carers to get involved, to send in comments on that future model. So all the thinking that we've distilled down in that new model, and then that will then go to Cabinet in September, hopefully for agreement, and it will then roll out from that point forward. Most children's transport's being put in place now for September, so I don't think parents are going to see any real changes in the September period. There'll still be a very typical service, but the collaboration, the flexibility will be available from that point forward, and we'll be the 4 caseworkers I talked about we're bringing into the transport team will be there to help broker and support and facilitate that. So, Richard, there you go. When will the current arrangements be likely to change in line with the new policy? So the new policy will formally come into formal force September 2018, but we know parents would like to take up some of these ideas much sooner, so we will create a mechanism that will allow parents to do that much quicker. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. I'll draw it to a close there. If you've got any questions, my email address is on the screen, and you're very welcome to send in your comments, and we'd love to hear from you. And we will come back to you in due course. So thank you for your time, and have a good evening.